Hello my quilting friends! My name is Leah Day, and in this video we are piecing this Dainty Dresden ring. It is 16 petals. We are creating that beautiful curved edge with our circle template, and you're going to need Dresden template number 5 in order to create this ring. For this block you will need pink strip cut 1.5 inches wide, another pink or red strip cut 2.5 inches wide. I'm also going to be fusing the top edge of these petals, so you're going to need some fusible web cut into 1-inch strips, and this is light steam-a-seam 2. So let's go on ahead and get this prepped up. We're going to flip these over, and with this particular fusible web you have paper on both sides of the fusible, so I peel off paper from one side, and I'm just going to line this up with that top edge of the fabric and smooth that out and give it a good press. So just follow the instructions on your fusible web to fuse that to both strips. So I'm going to fuse that to the top edge of the pink, and then also fuse a strip to the top edge of this kind of pinky red color too. Now it's time to cut out our petals. I am using Dresden template number 5, and I'm making sure that the fusible web is to the top here on that strip. And I'm going to line up my template so that the narrow edge of the template's lined up with the bottom edge of the strip. And just line it up just like so. Go on ahead and cut to one side, then rotate. And I do have true grips on the back. That's why it's stuck as I spun it around. There we go. That's how I'm going to cut out all of those smaller petal shapes. Now I'm going to take the 2-inch circle template. This is how I created that cute little curve right across the top. This is obviously a very small mini Dresden plate, or Dresden ring I should say, and for this, we have to use 2 templates in order to do the cutting. So I just fold the petal first in half and create a crease line. If you can't see that crease line clearly, you might want to mark it with a fabric marking pencil. I can see that pretty good. I'm going to line up a straight line using my 2-inch circle template. I'm lining up a straight line on that template with that crease line. And then I'm going to take a smaller rotary cutter. This is a 28mm, and I'm going to use that just to buzz right around that edge. Be very careful. Slow and steady wins the race. That is how I'm going to trim up all of those smaller petals. The cutting for the wider petals is almost exactly the same. I'm going to make sure that fusible web is to the top edge. I'm going to use that Dresden template number 5 again, making sure the narrow edge is lined up with the side of the fabric that does not have fusible web. So just line that up nicely. Cut one side, rotate it around, always cutting with your dominant hand. Cut the opposite side. And just like before, we're going to fold this in half, create a crease line, and then cut a nice smooth curve in the top of that petal to create our curved edge. And if you want to, you can just pull that back ever so slightly so you're not cutting right to the edge. It can be challenging, you know, have the template slip, you know, have it not end up being a nice smooth edge. So make sure to put true grips on the back of your circle template. I have some little dots here, and that helps stop it from slipping. So there we go. You're going to need a total of 8 in the bigger size and 8 in the smaller size. To piece this ring, arrange the petals in sets of 4. Piece the seams starting from the shorter edges to the outside. Stitch all the way down to the ends of the longer petals. Then press the seam allowances over towards the larger petals. Piece the quarters of the ring together in sets of 2, then piece the 2 halves together to complete your ring. So here is our Dainty Dresden, beautiful Dresden ring. Of course, you can turn it into a Dresden plate by covering the center circle with the circle applique. But because we have this fusible web here on the back, I've decided to take the 3-inch circle from my circle template set and place it on top, and we're going to cut out a nice perfect circle. And in this way we won't have to finish this inside. We won't have to turn it under or anything. The Fusible Web is going to do the work for us. So I am using a pen here. I actually think I'm going to switch to a pencil. You never know how ink is going to work with the kind of slightly waxy paper that we work with Fusible Web. But I think a pencil is a pretty safe bet here. So I'm just going to mark this circle very carefully, and then I think I'm going to cut this out probably with scissors. I think I'll probably be more accurate with scissors than if I tried to take a rotary cutter with this. Because of all the piecing involved, obviously I don't want to accidentally slip and, you know, cut this bigger than it needs to be. Okay, now I'm going to grab some scissors, and these are my favorite applique scissors. I'm going to clip right up to that line and then carefully cut along it. And I just want a nice smooth cut, as smooth as I can make it. There's a lot of layers here, and I press my seam allowance to one side to the taller petals. So if you decide to do different colors, just make sure that the longer, or I should say the wider strip is your darker color, so that way your fabrics don't shadow through. There we go. Just slow and steady wins the race. As I'm going over those seam allowances, I can definitely feel it. My scissors kind of want to catch and do something weird right there, so just slow and steady going all the way around. And there is going to be a good bit of Fusible Web to the paper backing to kind of carefully pick apart. So just understand that we save a little bit of time with Fusible Web in the form of not having to turn, you know, the curve over, but sometimes that can end up costing time later whenever we go to peel all the paper off. And these are a lot of petals, 16 petals that, you know, each one has paper over the petal itself plus in the seam allowance. We need to get all of it out. All right, so that was very careful, slow trimming. Let's see how it looks. Might not be absolutely perfect, but I am really pleased with that. I think that turned out really nice. Now this is very delicate, so let's be very, very gentle as we turn it over. And then, like I said, we're going to need to peel off the paper backing in the seam allowance here. And you might need to get some tweezers. You just need to figure out what works best for you and just carefully pull that out. The stitching might catch, so watch out for that. And then peel it off of the smaller petals. Just work one at a time. If you can't get the whole piece in one go, don't worry about it. Just work in small sections. Here we go. A little bit in the seam allowance there. Honestly, yes, this is going to be the most time-consuming part. Just getting all of this paper off. There we go. And then now kind of open up the seam allowance here on these larger petals and do the same thing. I like to pull off the seam allowance, the paper on the seam allowance first, and then peel off the paper from the whole petal. Okay, so working all the way around, all 16 petals, peel all the the paper backing off, and carefully press the seam allowance back in place, and then we'll be ready to place our petal on the background fabric. So I have my piece of background fabric here. This is cut around 13.5 inches. I will trim these down to 12.5 inches later on when I'm ready to put my quilt top together. I have folded it in half both directions to create some crease lines that I'm going to use to line this Dresden ring up. And this is very delicate, so be gentle, be very, very careful with it, because if we get too heavy-handed, it's really easy for a Dresden ring like this to get distorted and no longer be circular and not really look as good. So we could set it up like this and have the pink petals, the shorter petals, run through the center. I'm kind of liking it like this, where the bigger petals run through the center, but it's entirely up to you. And because this is Fusible Web and I use light steam-a-seam too, it is sticky. So I'm going to just generally get a few of these kind of stuck down, and then if I need to shift and wiggle it around, I can. I can grab my 3-inch circle template again and kind of just make sure that this is looking circular, you know, shift it around a little bit, whatever I need to do, because that center, that's going to be the part that distorts, you know, if something's going to look off, it's going to be probably starting in the center and working its way out. I'm going to shift a few of these in just a bit, but otherwise I'm really happy with this. I think it turned out really nice. All right, now I'll grab my iron and give it a fuse. And to finish the edge, because these are raw edges, they were cut right along the fusible web. If you don't want the edges to fray at all, then you're going to want to do some sort of zigzag stitch. I'm going to allow them to fray slightly, so I'm just going to do a straight line of stitching right along that outer edge and the inner edge as well. So that is how I made my delicate dainty ring. I hope you enjoy learning how to make this with me. If you'd like to join in the fun, you can find your Dresden template set, your circle template set. You can find both of them linked up together at leahday.com/Dresden. Until next time, let's go quilt.